Be going over Cummins Insite today. Cummins Insite is a software that I've used for going on 17 years now. It's a very powerful program for Cummins OEM diagnostics. It does have a few downsides, one being that it's a little slow, but it's a very good software. So basically my goal today is to show you how to navigate this software as seamless as possible. So to do that, we'll go ahead and open up Insight. And I'm going to start from scratch just so you can see everything that I'm doing here. So I can talk about this as I go through it. So as soon as this loads, we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Scott Meek. While we're waiting, I'm a trainer here. Been here for about 2 years. Again, use Cummins Insight for going on 17 years now. So if you have any questions as we go through this, again, you're all on mute, but just if you have a question, just send it over on the chat function and I'll be glad to answer it as we get started. So as soon as this opens, we'll rock and roll. All right, so once Cummins Insight opens up, if you've never used it or if you're getting ready to use it or if you've ever changed adapters, let me teach you how to create a adapter here. So let's say you're using an inline 7 and you decide to buy a USB link, or let's say you're using a USB link and you decide to buy a diesel link, or whatever the case. Now, in order for your communication adapter to work, we have to set that up with the software. So to do that, we just come down here and we click this little drop-down box and we come to Add New. When we go to Add New, we just follow the prompts. So we click Next. And then I wouldn't do Auto Configure. Auto Configure ends up taking a long time and sometimes doesn't find the correct adapter. Again, if you've already got an adapter established, you may not need to do this, but it's helpful to know. So I choose RP1210 adapters like you see here. I click Next. And then once you've downloaded the drivers for your adapter, in other words, if you bought a Nexic, you download the Nexic drivers or you download the Diesel Link drivers. When you download the drivers, this program will automatically find those. So in this case, if I wanted to use a Cummins Inline 7, for an example, if I wanted to add that, I would just choose Inline 7. Then I would choose the type of connection I want to make, whether that's Bluetooth, USB, or Wi-Fi. Now, me personally, I think USB is the best connection, especially if you do any type of programming features at all. I would always recommend going USB. And then you can just choose your protocol, whether that's 1708, 1939, or auto detect. Auto detect is a pretty standard one. It's pretty easy to use. It'll automatically detect whether you have communication on 1939 or 1708. So this is how I would set mine up. If I was adding an inline 7, I'd do an inline 7, I'd do USB, and I'd set it up with auto detect. Then I would click Next, and then you can name this whatever you want to name it. I just generally leave the default message there because it lets me know that I'm trying to use an inline USB. Click Next, and then to make it active, you'd click here, or to set up another connection, you'd click here, but we don't need to do that, so we'll just click Finish. So now what we have is our inline 7 USB. So if I was using the inline 7, I would have to select this first. In this case, I'm actually using a DG-DPA5 dual CAN, so I'm going to choose this one. Now, once you've chosen one, it generally defaults to that, so you generally don't have to choose this every time. It's just when you add a new one or want to change adapters or protocols. Now, once we go to connect, we have security type. Security type is basically what type of password is in this vehicle. Does this vehicle have a password? A lot of times as technicians, you don't know the answer to that. You don't know if it has a password or not. So if you don't know if it has a password, easy. All we're going to do is click connect. If it does have a password, and if it's a master, adjustment, or reset password, you'll have to choose which one of these it is. Generally, most people choose master because they lock everything on the ECM or nothing at all. All right. So generally, it'll be under master. If somebody does give you a password to their vehicle, it's most likely going to be master, so you would choose master. And then you would enter in your ECM password and click connect. Now, if you don't know if it has a password, which is generally the most common, all we have to do is choose none and click connect. And if it is password protected, it'll have a pop-up box that'll tell us that. And if it is password protected without the password, we can go in and still look at fault codes and we can still look at data. We generally can't change anything without that password. So some are password protected, some aren't. Generally you don't know, so I just come in and click connect. Now what that's going to do is going to go ahead and establish a connection with my ECM. And then if it's password protected, it'll let me know. If it's not password protected, it's just going to go ahead and start getting me connected, and you'll see what that looks like here in just a second. The Cummins service provider code, that is for basically engineering level service providers. So as customers, you won't have access to that most likely. But if you did have a service provider code, you'd enter that in here. All right, so once we get a established connection, what's going to happen is a work order is going to pop up, okay? Now, if this box pops up, just click New. Otherwise, this will come up. Basically, the first box we just had means a work order has been created for this specific ECM already. But if you've never connected to that truck, it's going to prompt you to create a work order. I highly recommend creating a work order. Every time you connect to a Cummins ECM, create a work order. Here's why. If for some reason your ECM was to fail at any point, by creating a work order, you have saved all of your settings, all of your programmable parameters and features. So basically what we could do is if your ECM failed, as long as you have saved a warranty report on that ECM at some point in its lifetime, you can create a template to load into the new ECM that already has all of your selectable parameters set. So it's really important to go ahead and do that. So the only thing I ever add in here is the customer name. You can fill out as much of this as you like, but I'll just put, test 1, click OK, and watch how fast that happens. I mean, that was just a super fast work order creation. So you really should do that just because it's a safety net, essentially. All right, so once we get connected, once we've created our warranty report, now we can start working. So the first thing we generally want to do as technicians is look at fault codes. So we'll click the fault code tab located here. Now what this is going to do is bring up all of the active and inactive fault codes that are currently in your system. So you can see here I'm connected to an ECM on a bench, so we have a lot of active fault codes here. Now what they do is when they have the fault codes, you'll have basically in status, the red engine light will be first, the yellow engine light will be second, the blue lamp would be third, and then inactives would be all the way at the bottom. So it basically lists them essentially by priority. Now, when you look at a fault code here, what you're looking at are a few key things. The first thing being the fault code number, this 132. That's the OEM fault code number. That's Cummins specific fault code number. The second box we have here is whether the fault code is active or inactive. The third box we have here is how many times this fault code has occurred over the life of the vehicle, or at least until it's been reset, essentially. The fourth box we have here is the color of the light that's on in the dash. Notice this says red. Notice we have a red circle. That means a stop engine lamp is on your dashboard. Then we have a fault code description. Accelerator pedal or lever position, sensor circuit 1, voltage below normal or shorted to a low source. Then if we scroll all the way over to the right, this will be the generic fault code, basically the OBD fault code information. When you're using Cummins Insite and a Cummins engine, you realistically don't really ever need this, but it is there in case you did. With Cummins using OEM software on a Cummins engine, you need to focus on this fault code number and the description. So once we have our fault code, we can also expand that fault code by clicking this little drop-down box. And what that'll do is give us all of our freeze frame data from when this fault code occurred. Now notice there's duplicates. We have after treatment diesel exhaust fluid dosing unit off and off. Command position, closed and closed. Well, we only have one count. So whatever happened the first time is the same thing that happened the last time. What you see here is if you come up here to the top, notice it says first and last. So everything in this column is the freeze frame data for the very first time that fault code ever happened. The last is the freeze frame data in this column from the very last time the fault code happened. And then here we have timestamps. So the first fault code happened at 5,332 hours, 22 minutes, and 31 seconds. The last time it happened was the same timestamp, 5,332 minutes, hours, 22 minutes, 31 seconds. Here's your status or how they label that. So since it's only one fault, the first and the last happen at the same time with the same information. But if you have more than one count, the first column will be the timestamp of the first time the fault code happened. The last will be the last time the fault code happened. And these rows are all the information that was recorded. Now, it's important when you look at this, you're looking at key on time. Notice here, ECM key on time. Well, if I come up here to ECM key on time, I currently have 5,389 hours. So it looks like this fault code occurred and was active this entire time. So we're looking at roughly, what, 50 hours-ish, maybe 60, between the current time and here. So it's 60 hours since the last time this fault code happened, but it's happened once and it's active. So basically it means it's been active this whole time. And this is just helpful for if you have an intermittent issue and you have a bunch of fault codes, you can expand the data and look and see when the last time it happened. And if the last time this fault code happened was, say, 1,000 hours ago, well, there's probably no sense in troubleshooting it. It's a very, very old fault, okay? Another thing that you can do is if you want to troubleshoot this specific fault, we just highlight it and double-click. Once we highlight a fault code and double-click it, what that'll do is it will bring us a bunch of good information about what's wrong with this fault code. It's going to show us some wiring. It's going to show us a circuit description. It's going to tell us the component location. It's going to tell us the actions taken when the fault code comes active, conditions for clearing the fault code, shop talk, which is like two technicians talking to each other. And then if you scroll all the way down and click this little hyperlink, what that'll do is take you through step-by-step troubleshooting. So this is all the engines that this code affects. And then as we come down, you'll notice that it gives us guided diagnostics. So we just follow the fault code. Is this active? Yes or no? If no, click here. Takes you to the next step. So it'll walk you through basically how to figure out what's wrong with this fault code. And you do that by highlighting and double-clicking on the fault code. If you want to clear these fault codes, we have two different ways to do that. With Cummins Insite, a lot of times, if you right-click, you'll get a menu here. So if I just hover over this fault screen anywhere, I right-click, I can go down to Reset All Faults, All, and when I click that, it will clear all of the fault codes that are able to be cleared. We can also print these faults from here as well. Another way you can clear faults is to click anywhere on the fault code screen and come up here to this little finger that's pushing a button. That is also how we can reset our fault code. So if you need to clear your faults, you'll just either click here and here, or click here, right-click, and then reset all faults. Do we have any questions on the fault tab before we move on to the next tab? And remember, everybody's on mute, so if you got a question or a response, just go ahead and send that through on the chat line. But we'll go ahead and move on as long as everybody feels good about the fault codes. Now, one thing that I'd like to do with Cummins Insight, I don't like to continuously click on all these things because what will happen is you'll start stacking windows. In other words, if I click on Data Monitor Logger, the fault codes are still up. So what I like to do is when I'm done with a window, I close that window out by clicking on that window again. So if I'm done with my fault codes, I'll click fault codes again and go back to this screen. And I do that because if you click through a bunch of these, it'll start stacking them, and it gets a little confusing trying to get through it at that point. All right, so the next major thing we have is Data Monitor Logger. So Data Monitor Logger is what allows us to watch live data in real time. So as soon as this loads up, we'll show you what that looks like. Again, Cummins, sometimes is a little bit slow. So what we have here is we have our value chart located here. Then we have our predefined parameter groups located here. And then we can actually create our own groups located here. So if I was just in a really quick hurry and I just wanted to watch a couple parameters really quickly, choosing one of these predefined lists might not be my best option because if I select all parameters by double-clicking on it, what that's going to do is bring up every single parameter that this ECM is monitoring. So this is a lot of different parameters. And the problem with that is the more parameters you have on a screen, the slower your refresh rate is, the slower your data is going to be recorded or broadcast. So the less parameters on the screen, essentially, the better. So what I like to do is if I'm looking for something quick, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll check all parameters, or maybe I'll choose after treatment. But generally, these don't have everything I want all the time. So what I like to do is either create a custom session or a custom parameter group that will last forever, or I'll just quickly choose a few to watch. So let me show you the difference. Again, we can double click on any of these to get pre-built sessions or predetermined lists of data. Let's say we wanted to build our own, and let's say we wanted to build one of these specifically for issues we check, but we didn't want to have to build it every time we use the software. What we'd do is we'd scroll down and we'd go to custom here. You'll highlight custom, right click, create new group. Now what we're going to do is we're going to name that group. So let's say we'll call this, Cummins low power. We'll just call it that. So what we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll start looking at all these different things that we want to monitor, and we'll just choose from the list what do we want. So if I wanted to look at something, I would say, let's say I wanted to look at pedal or lever indicator. All I got to do is click that and hit add. Let's say I wanted to look at dosing unit heater state. Highlight, click add. If I wanted to go through commanded position for dosing valve, highlight, click add. And we just go through and we choose the things we want to create a long-term, long-lasting session for. So I've just added some here. So once I've created my custom parameter list, and I've called this Cummins low power, we'll do /def since I got a bunch of def stuff in here. Once I've done that, I'm going to click OK. Now what I've done is I've created a session that will be here forever. So if I wanted to use a pre-built session that Cummins thought would be helpful, we can click on any one of these, double click on them, and we've got that set of parameter lists. Or since I built a custom one, I can double click that one, and now I have the custom list of the things that I want to monitor for this specific issue, right? So real easy to create those, and again, they'll be there forever. You just highlight custom, right click, and hit create new group. Now, if we wanted to get rid of these, let's say I don't ever use this Cummins low power def one, what I can do is highlight it, right click. I can either edit this group, which will either allow me to add more parameters or remove some. I can also rename this group something different. I can also delete this group. So again, highlight, right click, and then choose your function. A lot of times with Insight, anytime you highlight and right click, it gives you a menu basically. So highlight something, right click, and it'll give you that menu. Now again, if I wanted to get rid of this session, unfortunately I got to click this and re-enter it. There's not a really good way to jump between them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So it's easier when you're switching between parameter lists, just click on the data monitor logger, go out, come back into a blank slate. Now if I didn't want to create a custom session that would last forever or until I deleted it, let's say I just wanted to monitor two things really quickly, which is actually more common than you think. Like let's say we have a high pressure fuel rail issue and I just want to watch commanded versus actual. What I can do for quick ones is I can just click this little drop down box here and I can find what I want to monitor. So let's say we're dealing with fuel pressure like we were talking about, and I just wanted to monitor, duty cycle versus actual, or if I want to look at fuel pressure measured versus actual, I can just highlight the fuel rail pressure commanded, double click it, fuel rail pressure measured, double click it. So now I've found the two things that I want to monitor. I don't need this whole huge list of stuff. Now, the only time you'll need to do this is if you do it the way we're doing it now. You'll have to come up here and click play, okay? Notice when I wasn't playing, there was no information on here, right? So if I add these back, notice that this is blank. In order to watch this data live, once I select those groups, I'll have to come up here and click play, and that will give me the live data. You won't have to do that. You won't have to click the play button if you're using these parameter groups. You will have to click the play button if you're using these parameter groups. But again, this just makes it easy to look at two of the same things. Like if I wanted to look at intake manifold pressure and signal voltage, I can double click those two, click play, and now I'm looking at my actual values, okay? And then if I wanted to get rid of these, I can just double click, and it'll move them back off this screen to the left. So again, predetermined sessions with pre-built parameter lists, or you can create your own, or if you're in a hurry and just want to monitor one or two things, you can come down to this list, expand, double click, and then click play. And that will give you your live data. Click stop when you're finished. All right, now if you wanted to look at this in a different layout, let's say we wanted to look at Bill's low power, but we wanted to look at it in a graphical view. What we can do is highlight this session, right click, and go to start graphical monitoring. Now once I've done that, I'm going to come through here and I'm going to choose which of these things I want to use in a graphical view. So a good example of this would be something with after treatment, right? Let's say we wanted to watch our DOC inlet temperature. We wanted to look at our differential pressure. We wanted to look at our filter intake temp. And we wanted to look at our filter outlet temp. I've chosen these 4 things. Only 6 parameters can be selected for graphing. So remember that. You can only do 6 at a time. So if you need more than 6, you'll have to do live view. But I can set my sampling rate. Generally, I'm going to set my sampling rate as fast as I can. So I typically go with milliseconds. And then I'm going to go somewhere around 500 milliseconds. So what I'm looking for is about 1/2 of a second of sample rate. Once I've done that, I've set my sample rate at 1/2 of 1 second. I'll click OK. Now that's going to bring up our graphical view. It's going to show us our highlights here of what we're looking at. So we have a pressure chart, then we have a temperature chart, and then what we'll do is we'll start the regeneration and then click play. And then once the regeneration starts and we click play, now we have a graphical layout of our regeneration. You can use the graphical layout for whatever you want. It doesn't have to be regen. Regen is just one that makes it easy. When you're done, just click pause and then click file. And you can actually save it as a picture or as an export file so you can view this at a later time. And then you can also print this by clicking here. So by clicking the print button, we can print this graph out. So you can either save it as a picture of what's on the screen, or you can save it as an actual file and view it at a later time. So another place that you can do the graphical monitoring is up here. So we can right click anywhere in here. And I don't know why it's doing that all of a sudden. We can right click and we can do graphical monitoring here, or again, we can just click wherever we're at on this screen and come click this icon located here to view the graphical monitoring. This right here will allow you to set the sampling rate. So again, we can do it in real time. We can set our sampling rates for milliseconds, minutes, seconds, whatever you want. If I'm doing a really long recording of live data, I'm usually going to use seconds or minutes. If it's an extreme long recording, I might use hours, but that's pretty unlikely. But generally, my base value is 500 milliseconds. So I like my sampling rate to be at 1/2 of 1 second. So that's about as fast a data as we can really get and actually view and use. So do we have any questions on live data? How to view it? If you want to record it, it's real simple. If you wanted to record live data, all we would have to do is choose the session we want. So I'll do Bill's Low Power. So once I start Bill's Low Power and I look at my live data, what I would have to do if I wanted to record this, like say I'm driving it down the interstate and I want to record this, what I'm going to do is come up here to this plus symbol with the record icon behind it, and I'm going to click. Now once you see this little computer screen down here with the data moving across it, this means you are recording. Okay, so right now we're recording this live data. If you wanted to take a very quick snippet or screenshot of what's happening on the screen this very second, you can click this camera. Clicking that camera will give you a snapshot. So we can just save this as September test. So what that did is it saved a snapshot, but it also let us continue recording. When we're finished recording, what we'll do is we'll click the stop button. Once we've done that, we'll call that September recording. And we will click save. And now it's saved our recording. Now to come back and view the recording, what Insight does is it doesn't allow you to view the data live like we just did. It causes it to be formatted to a CSV file, which is an Excel file. So your recordings, when you go back and look up the log data, it's going to be in an Excel spreadsheet. So you'll be viewing everything in Excel format, basically. Any questions on the live data, how to perform the recording? To find the recording after you've done it, What you would do if you wanted to view a log file, you'll click on your folders here. You will go to your C drive. You'll go to Intellect. You'll go to Insight, and then you'll go to Logs. When you go to Logs, that's where you will find your September recording and your September test, the two that we just did. Remember, this is going to be a CSV file, so you will need Microsoft Excel or equivalent to open this up and view it. All right, ECM diagnostic test. This is really straightforward. ECM diagnostic test is where we're going to go to perform any type of test that we're trying to accomplish. This includes regenerations. This includes SCR system tests. This includes cylinder cutouts, DEF doser overrides, DEF pump overrides, your hysteresis test, your VGT actuator and installation and calibration test. So basically any type of test you're going to perform or any type of component calibration will be found under the diagnostic test wizard. Now, another thing that's really nice about this with Cummins is if you ever get confused, if there's ever a time you're trying to work on something and you don't know what that something does, we've all been there, right? We're looking at this and I say, okay, cool, this is a after treatment SCR system test. What does this do? What is the after treatment SCR system test? Well, when you select it and click next, what will happen is it's going to bring you into the system test. Now, we haven't started the test because we have to click start in order to do that. But what it's going to do is it's going to tell us what this test does. So in this case, the after treatment SCR system test can be used to monitor the status of after treatment SCR catalyst outlet NOx sensor and the after treatment SCR catalyst. So it tells us that. Now, if we want some more information, we can come down here and click this help icon right here. By clicking help, now it says there's no help for this topic, but let's see if we can find it. All right, after treatment, system leak test, diagnostic tests, count purge. So they really don't have any other extra on here, which is pretty rare. But generally when you hit this help icon, what that's going to do is bring you in and tell you more about it. But in this case, they figure this is enough information. And then it also gives you the initial instructions. So it's really important you read these. Engine has to be running at idle. Vehicle has to be stopped. And then it tells you what this test is going to do. It's telling you the test will start. It'll warm up the DEF system. It's going to check your rationality of your NOx sensors. It tells you all of that in this information here. So be sure to read that. Once you're ready, once you've read all this information, just click start. The test will run. So same thing goes for any of these tests. VGT hysteresis test. Click next. What does this do? Click help. The VGT hysteresis test will request the VGT to exercise the actuator and measure the range of actuator as well as the motor effort. The ECM will determine the VGT state and return a pass or fail message. So again, you come in here, you click the help file, and it tells us what this does. So we don't have to guess what these tests do. And again, it's nice to have that help because this isn't very helpful to me. The first time I ran a VGT hysteresis test, I didn't have any idea what that meant. So even being a 17-year Cummins certified veteran at the time, back in late 06, I said, I don't know what this is. So just by clicking on it and clicking that help right there, it tells you what you're about to do. It tells you the reason and what to expect. So really nice to have that functionality there. The biggest thing is when you're running any of these tests or any of these calibrations that you follow the information. These pop-up windows mean something. So for an example, if I did the VGT electronic actuator installation and calibration and I click next, well, the first thing it tells you is, hey, this is not a functionality test. Attempting to use this procedure as functionality will lead to fault codes or damage the actuator. So it's telling you right now, if you're just trying to test it, this isn't that test. So make sure you read these pop-up windows. Again, we can click help and it'll tell us everything we need to know about what we're getting ready to do. If we choose the install first, it makes sure a pop-up window comes up. Make sure you read it. The VGT actuator must be removed from the turbocharger before proceeding with install. I hit on this because I've seen a lot of technicians see this pop up, then they just ignore it. but it's actually telling you, hey, if your VGT actuator is not off of the turbocharger right now, you're wasting your time, right? So it's really helpful for any of these tests to have that information. So before we move on, do we have any questions on the ECM Diagnostic Test Wizard? All right. Advanced ECM data. Basically what this tab is for is, I'm not going to say only resets, but this is a big reset section, right? So the first thing we have here is after treatment history. This is really nice because it will give you the last 10 regenerations. It'll give you the timestamps of those regenerations, and it will give you the overall maximum temperature of those regenerations. Why is this so nice? Let me tell you what's so great about this after treatment history. You get a truck comes in, customer says it's regenning all the time. Okay? Well, this is monitoring active regenerations. So if a customer comes in and says, look, dude, my truck's regenerating 3 times a day, you can come into the after treatment history and look and see if that's actually the case. And here's why that's important. What a Cummins engine does is every 25 engine hours, if a Cummins engine does not run an active regeneration after 25 engine hours, it's going to automatically run one. So Cummins programming is basically based on the fact that most vehicles are going to be on an over-the-road state, you know, where you're going down the interstate, you don't need to run an active regeneration because duty cycle is plenty high, enough heat is being created. So if an active regeneration doesn't run within 25 hours, it's going to automatically run one regardless. Now, if we go through and we look at these timestamps, what you'll notice, a lot of these timestamps will be 25 hours away. So for an example, at 5175, we did a regen. At 5200, we did a regen. At 5225, we did a regen. So regens 4, 5, and 6 were all on the 25-hour timer, which means that this truck, looking at these timestamps, is regenerating perfectly, right? Where our active regenerations are 25 hours apart, which means this truck's not running active regenerations; it's running passive regenerations. So it's just a really good a good tool to use if you have a complaint of constant regens. But if you see 25 hours in between regens, that's beautiful. After treatment maintenance here. The after treatment maintenance, here's where this help button comes in handy, y'all. I keep talking about this help button, but let me tell you why it's so great. After treatment maintenance feature provides the ability for a user to reset the ECM to allow diesel particulate filter regeneration. If applicable, this feature is also used on DOC and after treatment fuel injector servicing. For more information, reference the help button below. So the question is, when do I choose this? When do I use this? And if I do use this, do I use all? Do I use DOC maintenance? Do I use DPF maintenance? What do I choose? Here's that help button. If I click on that, it tells me everything I need to know. Check out how neat this is. After treatment maintenance provides the ability for a user to reset the ECM to allow diesel particulate filter regeneration after replacing or servicing of diesel exhaust system components. This feature is to be used only when the most severe after-treatment fault conditions exist and corrective actions have been taken. These fault codes include 1691, 2637, 1922, 2638. So basically what it's telling you is if you have one of these 4 faults, you need to perform this maintenance. If you do not have one of these 4 faults, you do not need to perform this maintenance. So that help button is the secret, okay? So when you come in here, if you have any 4 of those faults, you can go ahead, choose all, and then click reset. Again, down here is a list of every time a reset has been performed. So if you look here, every time a reset has been performed in the after treatment maintenance, it will give you a timestamp, so you don't have to guess. Now, after treatment maintenance filter installation is a little different. Again, the after treatment maintenance installation feature is used to inform the ECM that the diesel particulate filter has been replaced. Let's go to that help file, and it tells you when you need to replace that filter and when you need to reset it. It gives you all that information. So once you've followed that, if this is the correct feature, click reset, and it will reset your DPF. So This one here is to be used when a DPF itself has been removed and cleaned. The after treatment maintenance is used to reset the active fault codes that were in the list previously. All right, anti-theft protection. If you do have the Cummins OEM anti-theft detection, you would actually come in here to set the passwords for it. I've never seen one of these in person. I've seen aftermarket ones. I've seen, manufacturers of vehicles use it, but I've never actually seen a Cummins OEM road relay system. But they're out there. So if you do have one and you need to set or change the password for the anti-theft protection, you will do that under the Advanced ECM tab.